KIRO, Seattle.
This is COVID-19 Seattle. I'm Dave Ross.
And I'm Aaron Granillo.
Governor Inslee unveils a new emergency grant program
to help small businesses who've been impacted by COVID-19.
Coming up, who qualifies and how much they'll receive.
King County transit workers make demands.
We are calling for full personal protective equipment and training.
More on their open letter to the county government.
Now that Washington schools are closed, many wonder if they'll reopen by fall. The state superintendent can't say for sure.
Even if we reopened, would families send their kids knowing that the disease doesn't have an antiviral yet or a vaccine?
Stay with us. Governor Inslee today launched a $5 million grant program to support the state's small businesses.
The grants will provide up to $10,000 for small businesses that have under 10 employees. And businesses can use this money to pay rent, utility bills, supplies, inventory, and other operating expenses.
And businesses can apply for these grants at the state's website, coronavirus.wa.gov.
Now, are these designed to add to the federal aid, or are these areas that the governor feels that the feds have not been able to cover?
These are intended to add to the Small Business Administration loans, because today the governor did mention that small business owners should still apply for those federal SBA loans, which are part of that big $2 trillion rescue package. The SBA is working with local banks as we speak to provide these forgivable loans. There's a lot of demand, though, on that program, and he knows that there's been a big backlog there, and a lot of small businesses have not been able to get qualified as of yet. But he says, certainly, keep applying for those SBA loans. On top of that, these loans are for, again, smaller businesses with fewer than 10 people. They can qualify for loans of $10,000 just to kind of keep you afloat during these uncertain times.
And these are, in fact, then the state program. These are grants. These would be outright gifts, essentially.
Exactly. You do not have to pay these back. This is coming out of the governor's state fund. So it is from money we already have on hand, and it is a $5 million program. And again, each grant's $10,000 per small business.
This would come in addition to some of the other state programs, including a statewide food relief fund, which is also on the way. You have more than 1.5 million people this week needing food for their families. The governor says that is double the usual number, and so the Washington State Food Fund will provide financial assistance to 3 organizations that supply food to every food bank in Washington.
And one more note, we also got word that former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz is helping restaurant workers who've been laid off in King County. The Schultz Family Foundation teaming up with other organizations to create the Plate Fund. So this provides one-time payments of $500 to restaurant workers, and it is meant to help those most in need, to help them with food, medicine, and other essentials. Any King County food service worker who has been laid off or got their hours cut can apply.
King County Metro Transit workers are calling for urgent action to better protect workers and riders from COVID-19. They sent an open letter to the county government today, and among their demands, more transparency and full disclosure of coronavirus cases in the workplace. They also want buses cleaned daily and the filters changed at the end of each shift.
And Dave, they are also calling for hazard pay. They say less time on the job means less exposure.
We want 30 hours work for 40 hours pay. So the point is the work needs to be shared so that nobody is out there for lengthy time.
And the workers also want all high-risk workers who are forced to stay home to receive their full pay.
I've talked a couple of times now to Nathan Voss. He earned the title of Metro's friendliest bus driver. He drives the number 7 route through the Rainier Valley. This is a job he loves. He does the night shift. He's a writer and a photographer the rest of the time. But he, too, as much as he loves that job, told me that he is worried about being exposed during his shift. It turns out that his route has pretty much become a rolling shelter for people who have no other place to stay. And while he's happy to serve them, he also feels that he's got to protect himself. And I can see his point. I know that Metro has taken steps saying that people have to board from the rear now so that they don't pass the bus driver. They're urging the bus drivers to use that privacy shield to prevent any kind of infection. But you can see how bus drivers might feel vulnerable in this environment.
And by the way, at least one bus driver in our state has died from COVID-19. Scott Ryan, he was only 41. He worked for community transit in Snohomish County, and it's unclear how he got sick, but yeah, he got COVID-19 and died.
So do we know where Metro stands on this? You have 50 workers and union reps signing this letter. And, of course, Metro's position is going to be the transit has to keep running because the service is considered essential. But at the same time, if your staff is getting sick or doesn't feel secure at work, that's going to reduce service over time.
Yeah, unclear where they stand right now. This letter was just delivered today to the county council, the executive, and Metro general manager. We have reached out to each of them and have not received a response back yet. They're trying to clean more and more and trying to keep passengers away from operators. But right now, yeah, there are dozens of cases we know of that transit workers are getting sick around the state. By the way, I want to mention one more thing at the federal level, because we know Senate Democrats, they are now proposing giving hazard pay to transit workers and other people who are required to go to work in the midst of all this, people like grocery store workers and pharmacists. Senate Democrats right now, they are proposing $25,000 each for these types of workers.
Well, I can tell you, nothing would create public panic quicker than finding your grocery store closed. So whatever it takes to keep the grocery store employees there, we'd better do it. Yesterday, Washington State schools closed for the rest of the year. Our state superintendent, Chris Reykdal, was live on the Gee Ursula Show this morning on KIRO Radio, and he answered listener questions about his decision in real time.
I want to get right to it. What was it? What was the final nail in the coffin? What was it that made you cancel the school year altogether?
The minute the governor decided to close schools originally, this was a couple weeks ago, we said we would keep looking at the data and whether or not the trend of disease and risk was subsiding substantially enough to make the call to come back. And clearly that just isn't the case. 12 or 13 other states have made the call in the last couple of days. We're kind of on the same pace with them. So that was the decision. And it's a tough one. It was a tough day for our state yesterday, tough day for students, especially our seniors, but a really difficult call, and one, though, that is focused on health and safety.
What is important for the senior students to know heading into the summer?
That they have grad requirements that they have to meet, that their school district has a plan for them already, and most of our seniors have been contacted by the school to check in with those, that local districts decide whether students have demonstrated enough competency against the standards to give them their passing credits. I am super confident they're going to graduate, and most of them are going to get a chance to improve their grades if they want to. That's going to be determined by schools, but we're going to get them graduated, and that's what they need to know most, and they got to stay close to their teacher right now.
What are some of the metrics that you guys are looking for specifically to reopen in the future?
So the governor's looking at those health metrics. I'm looking at another step that I inform him with, which is I'm checking in with superintendents and principals and school board members to say, in your community, as you have dialogue, even if we reopened, would families send their kids? Do they feel confident enough that they would send their children in this environment? Will teachers feel confident? Will we get our substitutes and bus drivers to come back, knowing that the disease doesn't have an antiviral yet or a vaccine? So that's the kind of stuff that the gov's going to be weighing along this. Every state is struggling with that question in particular, so they're all going kind of 1 or 2 weeks at a time. We thought it was wise to go the rest of the year, but the back to fall is going to be really complicated as the science plays out across the country.
You said yesterday, sir, that you are already contemplating how a return in the fall and how that might look. Talk about that with us, please.
Yeah, we have to think about this already. Short of a vaccine, which people continue to tell us is 12 to 18 months away, we have to figure out, A, if it's safe to come back even in the fall. Will we see a spike in cases if we are all sort of released from our social distancing framework? And when you stick 25 or 30 kids in a 900 square foot classroom, if somebody has this virus, it's going to be spread very, very rapidly. So then we'd be back in a position about closing the school for 2 to 5 days, cleaning it, trying to do contact tracing with families. Who did they contact? We're sort of going to come out of it the same way we went into it. So I'm planning both scenarios. We come back face-to-face or we come back at a distance.
Let's talk about the online learning. How far are we from making sure that it is available to all students?
Well, the platforms are all built out. So Google Classroom, Schoology, Microsoft Teams, there are a couple others. Those platforms are all there. They're free and available to every district. What's not there is devices in the hands of every kid. And we still have connectivity challenges, of course. And it's not just rural, although there's definitely connectivity challenges in rural Washington for sure, but it can be other places. The hardware is an interesting one. A lot of private sector companies are stepping up to help, but it's interesting. If you're a mom and dad and you're forced to work from home and you've got 2 kids at home, how do you share one computer? Maybe you need 2 devices or 3 devices. And so that's already emerging as a kind of subtle complexity, even when we get families connected.
Chris, you have kids, and I'm quite sure you have to have conversations as well. What are some tough conversations you've had to have with your kids during this public health crisis?
It started with the social emotional conversation. Kim and I, we check in with them a lot on getting past the surface answer to how you doing, right? Because they'll say, I'm fine. A lot of kids do that. That's really natural. Asking them really pointed questions about, can you tell me or describe for me kind of what you're thinking right now, or what are the conversations you're having with your friends over, your social media platforms? If you can draw a specific question out of your kid and get them talking about it, it's much better than an open-ended question that's a yes or a no or something like that. So that's really where we spend some energy. And I just think as a parent, we're all absolutely in this together right now.
You can hear the full interview, which also covers SAT and ACT testing cancellations at mynorthwest.com.
We will be back tomorrow and every day after with a 10-minute rundown of the daily local news. You can subscribe to this podcast, and you can also find our news coverage on mynorthwest.com or listen live at 97.3 FM.